The silent dawn drifted like a broken toy in the endless black of space. Captain Nara pressed her blue-scaled hand against the cold metal wall of the bridge and felt the ship's dying heartbeat through the vibrations. Each pulse of the emergency, power grew weaker, like a wounded animal taking its last breaths. 2 days ago, everything had been normal. Her crew of 8 Velkans had been laughing in the mess hall, sharing stories about their families back on Velka Prime. They were carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies, nothing valuable enough to attract pirates, or so they thought. The raiders had come out of nowhere, appearing from behind a dead asteroid like ghosts. Their ships were fast and brutal, designed for one thing, taking what they wanted. The attack lasted only minutes. They blasted the Silent Dawn's engines, cracked the hull in 3 places, and stole every medical container in the cargo bay. Then they vanished back into the dark, leaving the Velkans to die slowly. Now the ship was a tomb waiting to be sealed. The main power core was dead. Life support ran on backup batteries that would last maybe 6 more hours. The artificial gravity had failed completely, so everyone floated around the ship like ghosts themselves. Nara could see her breath in the freezing air of the bridge. Engineer Quito floated past her, checking the emergency beacon for the 100th time. His forearms moved quickly over the controls, but Nara could see the hopelessness in his large eyes. "Still broadcasting, Captain," he said in their musical language. But no responses. Nara wasn't surprised. In her 20 years of space travel, she had learned the hard truth about the galaxy. Most species looked out for themselves first. Rescue missions cost money, time, and resources. Unknown ships in distress were usually ignored unless they belonged to someone important or powerful. The Velkans were neither. The Terran Coalition barely knew they existed. The mighty Zorathian Empire considered them primitive. The tech-advanced Quantum Collective saw them as irrelevant. Why would any of them risk their ships and crews to save 8 dying Velkans floating in the middle of nowhere? Medical officer. Yuna drifted into the bridge, her healing pouches floating around her like small moons. "Captain, I need to talk to you," she said quietly. Nara knew what was coming. They all did. "The oxygen scrubbers are failing," Yuna continued. "We have maybe 4 hours left before the air becomes too toxic to breathe. The crew wants to record their final messages now while they can still think clearly." Nara nodded slowly. It was the smart thing to do. Better to say goodbye while you still could than to wait until panic and oxygen deprivation made thinking impossible. She had seen it happen before on other ships. The final hours were never pretty. One by one, her crew gathered what little personal belongings they could carry. Pilot Jisoo pulled out a small crystal containing pictures of his children. Navigator Hana held a pressed flower from her homeworld. They found quiet corners of the ship and began speaking to their recording devices, saying the words they had hoped they would never have to say. Nara recorded her own message last. She looked into the small camera and thought about her sister, back home, about the nephew she would never see grow up, about all the places she had planned to visit when she retired from space travel. "I want you to know that we tried," she said softly. "We sent out the distress signal. We followed all the protocols, but space is big and we are small, and sometimes that's just how things end." The beacon kept broadcasting into the void, sending out its automated message every few minutes. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Velkan Transport Silent Dawn. Hull breach, power failure, life support critical. 8 souls aboard, coordinates follow." The message traveled at light speed through the emptiness, reaching farther and farther from their dying ship, hoping to find anyone who might care enough to help. But the galaxy stayed silent. No ships changed course, no rescue vessels appeared on their sensors. The great civilizations continued their business, while 8 Velkans prepared to die forgotten in the dark between the stars. As the temperature dropped even lower and their breath began to fog more thickly, Nara gathered her crew one last time. They floated together in the main corridor, holding hands in the way of their people, sharing warmth and comfort in their final hours. They told old stories and sang the songs their mothers had taught them, trying to keep fear away with memories of home and hope. The emergency beacon continued its lonely call, but hope was a luxury they could no longer afford. The static-filled voice cut through the Silent Dawn's bridge, like lightning through a storm cloud. Captain Nara jerked her head up from where she had been floating near the failing life support console, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Minho of the human cargo ship Determination. We've received your distress signal and are adjusting our course to assist. Please respond if you can hear this transmission." For a moment, nobody moved. The 8 Falcons just stared at each other in the dim emergency lighting, their large eyes wide with shock. Engineer Keto was the first to break the silence, his forearms fumbling with the communication controls so quickly he nearly broke them. This is Vulcan Transport Silent Dawn," Nara managed to say into the microphone, her voice shaking. "We confirm your transmission. Are you really coming to help us?" "That's affirmative, Silent Dawn. We're about 11 hours out at maximum burn. Hang tight, we're bringing everything we need to get you running again." Humans. Nara could hardly process it. She had heard stories about the strange new species that had appeared in the galaxy only 200 years ago. They were supposed to be crazy, reckless creatures who flew in ships that looked like they were built from scrap metal and held together with hope and stubbornness. Most of the established civilizations considered them a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. The Zarathian Empire called them metal scavengers because their ships were always cobbled together from parts of other vessels. The Quantum Collective dismissed them as primitive tinkerers who didn't understand proper engineering principles. Even the peaceful Andorian Federation warned that humans were unpredictable and should be approached with caution, but here they were responding to a distress call that every other species in the galaxy had ignored. Medical Officer Yuna floated over to Nara, her eyes bright with tears of relief. "Captain, I've heard things about humans. They say they never leave anyone behind, no matter who they are or where they come from." Pilot Jisoo laughed, a sound that hadn't been heard on the ship for 2 days. "I heard they once rescued a Zarathian battlecruiser that had been attacking them just hours before. The Zarathians couldn't believe it. As the hours passed, the crew of the Silent Dawn found new energy. They worked together to stabilize what systems they could, preparing for the arrival of their unexpected rescuers. The temperature was still dropping and the air was getting thinner, but now they had something they hadn't had before: hope. Navigator Hana managed to get the long-range sensors working just long enough to spot the approaching ship. What she saw made her gasp. "Captain, you need to see this." The human vessel looked like nothing Nara had ever seen in her 20 years of space travel. It was clearly a cargo ship, but it appeared to have been rebuilt dozens of times. The hull was a patchwork of different metals and colors, with sections that obviously came from completely different types of ships. Some parts looked ancient, others seemed newly welded. Pipes and cables ran along the outside of the hull in ways that would horrify any proper engineer. "It looks like it shouldn't be able to fly," whispered Engineer Keto, all 4 of his arms pressed against the sensor display. But fly it did. The Determination moved through space with a confidence that spoke of experienced hands at the controls. As it got closer, they could see more details that defied logic. The ship had at least 6 different types of engines, 3 different communication arrays, and what looked like a garden growing on one section of the hull under a transparent dome. "How is that thing even holding together?" Yuna asked in amazement. The answer came from Captain Minho himself when he hailed them again. "Sorry about the delay, Silent Dawn. Had to stop and jury-rig our number 3 engine. She's been acting up since we helped pull that Centauri mining ship out of an asteroid field last week. But don't worry, we're almost there." That was so typically human, Nara thought. They were coming to rescue complete strangers while their own ship was falling apart, and they apologized for being a few minutes late. When the Determination finally appeared on their visual screens, it was even more impressive up close. The ship was huge, at least twice the size of the Silent Dawn, and covered in so many modifications and additions that it was impossible to tell what the original design had been. But somehow, despite looking like it had been assembled by children, playing with building blocks, it radiated strength and reliability. "Silent Dawn, this is Determination. We're moving into docking position. Our engineer Gina is already suiting up to come aboard and assess your situation. Don't worry, folks. We've got you covered." As the massive human ship maneuvered alongside their dying vessel with surprising grace, Nara felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete trust in a stranger. These humans had traveled across the galaxy to save people they had never met, asking for nothing in return. The docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk that vibrated through both ships, and suddenly the silent dawn didn't feel so alone anymore. The airlock hissed open, and Captain Nara got her first look at actual humans. Captain Minho was shorter than she had expected, with dark hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Behind him floated Engineer Gina, a woman with oil-stained coveralls and a tool belt that looked like it contained half a hardware store. What struck Nara most wasn't their appearance, but the way they moved. Despite being in a completely alien ship with a dying life support system, they showed no fear, no hesitation. They moved with the confidence of people who had done this many times before. "Wow, you folks really got worked over," Minho said, looking at the damaged walls and flickering lights. "Don't worry, though, we've seen worse. Gina here once brought a ship back from the dead after it had been floating for 3 weeks. Gina was already pulling strange-looking tools from her belt, devices that seemed to be made from parts of other devices. "First things first, let's get some heat and air flowing in here before you all turn into popsicles," she said with a grin that somehow made everything feel less desperate. Captain Nara tried to maintain some dignity, despite floating helplessly in zero gravity. "Captain Minho, we must discuss payment for your rescue services. The Velkan Transportation Guild has standard rates for emergency assistance." Minho looked genuinely confused by this. "Payment? Lady, you're dying out here. We don't charge people for not dying." He pushed off a wall and floated toward the bridge. "Where's your main power distribution panel?" Engineer Quito, still amazed that anyone had come to help them, pointed toward a section of wall that had been partially melted by the pirate attack. "It's behind there, but the entire grid is fried. According to every manual I've ever read, it can't be repaired without a shipyard." Gina laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the cold air. "Manuals are for people who give up easy. Hand me that plasma cutter, would you?" What happened next defied everything Nara knew about ship repair. Gina didn't follow any standard procedures. She didn't consult technical diagrams or run safety checks. Instead, she seemed to understand the ship's problems by instinct, tracing power lines with her fingers and listening to the hum of failing systems like a doctor checking a patient's heartbeat. "See, here's your problem," she said, pointing to a junction box that had been completely destroyed. "The pirates knew exactly where to hit you. This junction feeds power to life support, artificial gravity, and communications all at once. Very efficient design. But if it gets damaged, you're pretty much dead." She pulled out what looked like a metal box covered in switches and blinking lights. "Good thing humans don't believe in efficient design. We believe in backup plans for our backup plans." The device was clearly homemade, probably assembled from a dozen different sources. But as Gina connected it to the Velkan ship's power grid, using cables that definitely weren't meant to work together, something miraculous happened. The lights got brighter. The air circulation system coughed back to life. The temperature started to climb. "How did you do that?" Quito asked, his forearms examining the connections in amazement. "This shouldn't work. The power requirements alone should overload the system." "Shouldn't work according to who?" Gina replied, already moving on to the next problem. "The way I see it, if electricity wants to flow, we just give it a path to follow. Doesn't matter if that path is pretty or follows the rules." While Gina worked on the ship's systems, Captain Minho gathered the Velkan crew together. From a bag on his back, he pulled out packages of what looked like food bars and handed them out to everyone. "These aren't much to look at, but they'll keep you going," he said. "My grandmother's recipe. She always said you can't think straight on an empty stomach, and you can't solve problems if you can't think straight." Medical Officer Yuna examined one of the bars carefully. As a medical professional, she was trained to be cautious about alien food. But the crew was weak from 2 days without proper nutrition, and the bars smelled surprisingly good. "Are you sure these are safe for Velkans to eat?" she asked. "My crew's been sharing food with every species we've met for the past 5 years, Minho said. "Haven't killed anyone yet. Well, except for that one time with the Rigelian ambassador, but that was more about the hot sauce than the food itself. The food was strange but delicious, with flavors that somehow reminded Nara of home even though she had never tasted anything like it. As warmth returned to the ship and strength returned to her crew, she watched Gina work with growing amazement. The Sao, human engineer, moved through the damaged ship like she belonged there, fixing problems that should have been impossible to solve. She welded hull breaches with a torch that looked like it had been rebuilt from spare parts at least 3 times. She rerouted power through systems that weren't designed to work together. She even managed to get the artificial gravity working again, though it flickered on and off in a way that made everyone float unexpectedly every few minutes. "Sorry about the gravity," Gina called out while hanging upside down from a damaged ceiling panel. "I'll get it stable in a minute. Just need to convince these 2 systems to play nice with each other." Through it all, both humans worked with a cheerfulness that seemed completely inappropriate for the situation. They joked with each other, shared stories about other rescues, and treated the whole crisis like it was just another day at work. The Silent Dawn now hung securely in the far tow cables of the Determination, being pulled through space toward the nearest station. Inside the Velkan ship, the air was warm again. The lights were steady, and for the first time in 3 days, Captain Nara could think about something other than dying. She found herself in the restored mess hall with Captain Minho, sharing a meal that Gina had somehow prepared using ingredients from both ships. The human food was strange but comforting, and Nara realized she was hungrier than she had thought possible. "I have to ask," Nara said, watching Minho eat what looked like soup made from vegetables she didn't recognize. "Why did you come for us? Your people barely know mine exist. We're not allies, we're not trading partners, we're just strangers floating in the dark." Minho set down his spoon and looked at her with those kind eyes that seemed much older than his face. "You know what my grandfather used to tell me. He said the universe is cold and empty and full of things trying to kill you. The only warm spots are the ones we make ourselves." He gestured toward the viewport, where stars stretched past them in long lines as they traveled faster than light. "Out there, space doesn't care about your species or your politics or your bank account. A hull breach will kill a human just as dead as it'll kill a Velkan. When someone's in trouble, they need help. That's all there is to it." Nara had heard stories about human rescue operations, but she had assumed they were exaggerated. "Is it really true that your people have volunteer ships just wandering around looking for people to save?" "Oh, that's just the beginning," Minho laughed. "Show her the chart, Gina." Engineer Gina, who had been tinkering with some device in the corner, pulled out a small tablet and activated a holographic display. What appeared made Nara's breath catch in her throat. The entire human section of the galaxy was covered in a web of glowing lines and dots. Patrol routes, emergency beacons, supply depots, and volunteer stations stretched across dozens of star systems like a vast safety net. "Every green dot is a volunteer rescue ship," Gina explained, pointing to hundreds of moving lights. "Every blue line is a patrol route. The red triangles are emergency supply caches that anyone can use, no questions asked." Nara stared at the display in amazement. "This must cost your government billions of credits to maintain." "Government?" Minho shook his head. "This isn't government-run. These are just regular people doing this in their spare time. Freighter. Captains, retired pilots, families with their own ships. They all monitor the emergency frequencies while they're going about their business." "But why?" Nara asked. "What do they get out of it?" Gina sat down across from her, her oil-stained hands wrapped around a cup of steaming tea. "My brother Do-Yun runs supply runs to the outer colonies. Last year, his ship broke down in the Kepler Nebula. He was 3 days from the nearest station, with a failing life support system and no way to call for help." She paused to take a sip of her tea, and Nara could see the memory was still painful. A family of traders found him. Mom, Dad, 2 kids just trying to make a living hauling agricultural supplies. They spent 2 weeks fixing his ship, shared their food, their water, even their spare parts, never asked for anything in return. When Do-Yun asked how he could repay them, you know what they said? Minho continued the story. They told him to help the next person he found in trouble. That's it. That's how the whole system works. Nara thought about her own people, the Velkans. They were good people, peaceful and kind, but their society was built on contracts and agreements, formal relationships, and careful negotiations. The idea of strangers helping strangers without any expectation of reward was almost incomprehensible. "Other species think we're crazy," Gina said, as if reading her thoughts. "The Zorathians have committees that have to approve rescue missions. Takes them 3 days just to decide if someone's worth saving. The Quantum Collective runs cost-benefit analyses before they'll send help." "And the Centauri Republic?" Minho added with a bitter laugh. "They'll rescue you, but they'll charge you so much for the privilege that you'll be paying it off for the rest of your life." Pilot Jisoo, who had been listening quietly from the doorway, finally spoke up. "I heard that humans once rescued a Zorathian dreadnought that had been attacking human colonies just hours before." "The Iron Claw," Minho nodded. "Their engines failed during the battle. Our ships were damaged too, but we still pulled their crew off before their reactor went critical. Saved almost 1,000 Zorathian lives." "What happened after that?" Nara asked. "The Zorathian Empire was so confused they didn't know what to do," Gina grinned. "They kept waiting for us to demand something in return. Prisoner exchanges, territory, reparations. When we just went home, they thought it was some kind of trick. It took them 6 months to figure out we really didn't want anything," Minho continued. "Now their military academy teaches a whole course on human unpredictability." Navigator Hana floated into the room, her flower still clutched in her hand. "Captain Minho, may I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you have children?" Minho's face lit up with pride. "2 daughters. Suki is 8, Hana is 12. They're back on Earth with their mother." "Don't you worry about them when you're out here risking your life for strangers." Minho considered this seriously. "Every day. But I want them to grow up in a galaxy where people help each other. Where being stranded in space doesn't mean you're going to die alone. The only way that happens is if we all work to make it happen." He looked around at all the Velkans listening to him. "Besides, someday they might be the ones floating in the dark, hoping someone will answer their call. I want to make sure there's someone out there who will." As the hours passed and they drew closer to safety, Nara began to understand something that changed her view of the galaxy forever. Humans didn't help others because they expected something in return. They helped because they believed the universe was better when people looked out for each other. It was a philosophy so simple it was revolutionary. Nexus Station appeared on their view screen like a glittering jewel against the black of space. The massive trading post was home to dozens of different species, a place where the galaxy's many civilizations came together to do business. As the Determination guided the repaired Silent Dawn toward the docking bays, Captain Nara could see ships from across known space, sleek Andorian vessels, massive Zorathian warships, and the geometric craft of the Quantum Collective. But it was the human ship that drew the most attention. As word spread through the station's communication networks about another human rescue, curious aliens gathered at the observation decks to watch the arrival. Many had heard stories about human rescue operations, but few had seen one firsthand. Silent. "Dawn, this is Nexus Station Control," came the voice of the traffic coordinator, a Centauri with the typical formal tone of his species. "We have your docking assignment ready. Bay 12 has been prepared for emergency repairs." "Actually, we won't be needing those repairs," Captain Nara replied, still amazed at how normal her ship felt now. "The humans have already fixed everything." There was a long pause from the control tower. "Could you repeat that, Silent Dawn? Our sensors show your ship was completely disabled." Confirmed. Nexus Control. "The human crew of the Determination has restored all our primary systems. We are fully operational." Another pause, longer this time. "Understood, Silent Dawn. Proceed to standard docking. And welcome back to the living." As the 2 ships settled into their assigned bays, news of the rescue spread through the station like wildfire. In the cantinas and trading halls, aliens who had never spoken to each other before found themselves discussing the strange humans and their habit of saving strangers. A Zorathian merchant captain named Vex was telling anyone who would listen about the time humans had rescued his cargo hauler from pirates. "They came out of nowhere," he said, his reptilian features animated with excitement. "My ship was surrounded. My crew was preparing to surrender, and suddenly 3 human vessels appeared. They drove off the pirates and never even asked what. we were carrying. At another table, an Andorian diplomat shared her own story. My government sent me to negotiate with the humans after they saved one of our research stations from an asteroid strike. I went expecting to discuss payment and formal treaties. Instead, they served me tea and asked if our scientists needed any help with their projects. Captain Nara walked through these conversations as she made her way to the station's formal reception area. In her hands, she carried something that had been in her family for 6 generations, a Velkan honor crystal. The blue gem was perfectly clear, formed in the deep caves of her homeworld, and traditionally given only to the greatest heroes of Velkan history. She found Captain Minho in the station's main plaza, surrounded by a crowd of curious aliens asking questions about human rescue operations. He looked slightly overwhelmed by all the attention, answering questions with the same humble honesty he had shown throughout their journey. "Captain Minho," Nara called out, and the crowd parted to let her through. She held up the crystal so everyone could see it, and several aliens gasped in recognition. Velkan honor crystals were legendary throughout the galaxy, not because they were valuable, but because they were so rarely given. "This crystal has been in my family for 200 years, Nara announced, her voice carrying clearly through the plaza. "It was given to my ancestor by the Velkan Council for saving an entire colony from a plague. Since then, it has waited for someone worthy enough to receive it." She stepped forward and placed the crystal in Minho's hands. The human captain stared at it in amazement, clearly understanding the significance of the gift. "Captain Minho of the human ship Determination, I present you with this honor crystal on behalf of the Velkan people. You and your crew represent the finest qualities any being can possess: courage, compassion, and the willingness to risk everything for strangers." The plaza had gone completely silent. Even the station's background noise seemed to fade as every alien present witnessed this historic moment. "Furthermore," Nara continued, her voice growing stronger, "let it be known throughout the galaxy that any human ship will always find safe harbor in Velkan space. Our stations will provide fuel, supplies, and repairs to any human vessel, no questions asked and no payment required. This is our pledge, and it will be honored by every Velkan captain for all time." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Even the normally reserved Centauri merchants seemed moved by the ceremony. But Minho just stood there, holding the crystal, and looking slightly embarrassed by all the attention. "Thank you," he said simply, "but we didn't do anything special. This is just what people should do for each other." That response, so typically human, sent another wave of amazed murmurs through the crowd. Here was a being who had just been honored as a hero by an entire species, and he genuinely didn't understand what the fuss was about. A few hours later, as the Determination prepared to leave Nexus Station, Captain Minho made his way to the ship's communication array. Engineer Gina was there making final adjustments to their equipment. "All set, Captain," she said. "We're ready to resume our cargo run." Minho nodded and activated the ship's general broadcast system. His voice would now be transmitted on all emergency frequencies, reaching across several star systems to any ship that might be listening. "This is Captain Minho of the human cargo vessel Determination. We are departing Nexus Station and resuming standard operations. To all vessels in distress, please be advised that we are monitoring emergency frequencies on all bands. If you are in trouble, if you need help, if you are lost or damaged or just scared and alone, we are listening. We will come for you. This is our promise to you, and it will never change." He paused for a moment, looking out at the vast star field ahead of them. "The universe is big and dark and dangerous, but it doesn't have to be cold. Help is always available if you need it. You are never truly alone out here. This is Determination standing by." As the human ship departed Nexus Station and jumped to hyperspace, that simple message continued to echo across the galaxy's communication networks. On countless ships and stations, beings from dozens of different species heard those words and felt something they hadn't felt before: hope in the vast emptiness between the stars, where death waited in 1,000 different forms. A single promise carried the weight of an entire species' unwavering compassion. And throughout the galaxy, that promise was beginning to change everything.